When my family uninvited me from Thanksgiving, it wasn't a shock, but it still landed like a punch to the chest. For years, I had been the one who hosted, cooked, organized, and financed nearly every family holiday. I owned the largest place, had the best kitchen, and frankly, I was the one most capable of pulling off big gatherings. But recently, things had shifted. My sister had taken it upon herself to declare that smaller, more intimate holidays were better and that I was too extravagant. That was her excuse when she called me 2 weeks before Thanksgiving and told me not to come. She said it casually, like she was reading a grocery list, as if tossing me aside was the most natural thing in the world. And then she added, almost with amusement, that the family agreed. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't defend myself. I simply said, okay. And I meant it. Because in that moment, something inside me settled. If they didn't want me there, then I certainly wasn't going to force myself into a room where my presence was treated like an inconvenience. But sitting alone on Thanksgiving wasn't appealing either, and I wasn't going to spend the day sulking. So I decided to do something entirely different, something I knew none of them would ever expect. My estate sits on 12 quiet, scenic acres, with an open lawn that can hold hundreds of people. It's a place that usually echoes with silence, because I rarely invite anyone over. Most people in my life are used to seeing me at work, at events, or at restaurants, never at home. My family had always treated my estate like a symbol of arrogance rather than what it actually was, the product of decades of grinding effort, late nights, and taking risks they had always mocked. So I made some calls. Old coworkers, neighbors, a few acquaintances who'd moved to the city alone, a couple of families I knew were struggling, and even 2 employees who mentioned earlier in the week that they had no Thanksgiving plans. Every single person lit up when I told them they were welcome to come. For once, my home wasn't going to be the quiet, empty place it usually was. On Thanksgiving morning, the estate came alive. I hired 2 chefs, but I also cooked myself, because I loved it, not because anyone expected me to. Long tables were placed on the back patio with soft lighting and warm autumn colors. The fireplaces glowed, music played, and from the moment people began arriving, the silence I had grown used to was replaced with laughter, conversation, and gratitude. What surprised me most wasn't the number of people who came, but the energy they brought. There was no tension, no silent competition, no passive-aggressive remarks, no comparison of who brought what or who contributed more. Everyone helped with something, even if it was small. One of the neighbors brought pies she'd baked that morning. An old coworker arrived with a bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special moment. The 2 employees who attended kept thanking me repeatedly, and I realized that this holiday, one I had dreaded just days earlier, was turning into one of the best I'd ever had. We ended up with 32 guests in total. People spread across the rooms, some sitting by the piano, others playing with the kids outside, and a few wandering the paths through the garden. It was chaotic in the warmest way. For the first time in a long time, I felt surrounded by people who appreciated being there, not because of what I could provide, but simply because they enjoyed the company. Around 6 in the evening, while we were still eating dessert, my phone began buzzing. At first I ignored it, but eventually I glanced at the screen and saw message after message from my family group chat. Apparently their Thanksgiving had turned into a disaster. My sister had undercooked the turkey, there weren't enough seats, the kids were bored, and several relatives complained about the small intimate space she'd insisted on. Someone had finally asked where I was spending the holiday, and one of my coworkers had posted a photo online of my beautifully decorated table with dozens of smiling faces. That was all it took. Suddenly my sister was calling, telling me she didn't realize I'd be hosting something, as if it were any of her business. My mother texted asking why I didn't invite the family. My aunt demanded to know when I'd started, letting outsiders replace blood. I stared at the messages and realized not a single one of them apologized for uninviting me. Not a single one acknowledged how cruel it had been. They were upset because I was having a better time without them. I put my phone face down and returned to the table. I didn't owe anyone a response that night. Instead, I laughed with the people who chose to be there, the ones who appreciated the seat they were given. As the evening wound down, and the last guests left with full plates, warm hugs, and heartfelt thanks, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. My family didn't uninvite me from Thanksgiving. They freed me from it. And I finally learned that the people who truly value you will never make you beg for a place at their table. They'll simply be grateful to share one with you. When my family told me to stay home for Thanksgiving because they didn't need me this year, I thought it was a joke at first. They said it in that tone they always used when they wanted something from me without admitting it, light, dismissive, coated in false sweetness. But the moment I heard the finality in my mother's voice, I knew it wasn't a joke. They had already planned everything without me. My sister was hosting this year, and according to them, her house was already full. They said I should just relax and not make things complicated. I understood the message clearly. They didn't want me there. It shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did. I was used to being the family's backup plan, the extra pair of hands, the wallet they pretended not to depend on. But being excluded stung, especially after years of stepping in whenever they needed help. But I told them I understood and hung up the phone without arguing. If they truly didn't need me, then I wasn't going to force myself into their Thanksgiving. I walked through the halls of my estate that night, the quiet echoing in a way that made my chest feel heavier. The place was beautiful, worth every dollar I'd spent over the years, but on holidays it tended to feel too large, too empty. For a long time, I had imagined filling it with family gatherings, with laughter and conversations and kids running down the hallways. But my family never wanted to host here. They said it made them uncomfortable, as if the walls themselves judged them. Maybe that was why their words hurt. Or maybe it was because every Thanksgiving I had imagined for myself involved people who showed up because they wanted to, not because they needed something. The morning after they uninvited me, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If the people who shared my blood didn't want me around, then I would open my home to people who did. People who appreciated kindness, not convenience. People who saw the value of an open door rather than taking it for granted. I started making calls, not dramatic invitations, just genuine ones. A single father from my gym who'd mentioned his kids were spending the holiday with their mother and he'd be alone. A neighbor I'd only spoken to twice but who always waved kindly. An older couple I'd once helped with their dog. A few coworkers who didn't have family nearby. A couple who'd recently moved to the area and had no one to spend the holidays with. I didn't know them well, but I knew loneliness when I heard it. To my surprise, almost everyone said yes. By noon the next day, I had 18 confirmed guests. By the end of the week, the number had grown to 32. Every person seemed genuinely grateful to be invited. Maybe that was what made it feel so different from every family holiday I'd ever attended. There was no guilt, no pressure, no silent scoreboard of who contributed what. Everyone was just excited to celebrate together. Preparation became a kind of therapy. I hired caterers but still cooked several dishes myself, moving through my kitchen with the ease of muscle memory. The dining room glowed with warm amber light, the long polished table set with gold-accented plates I rarely used. Outside, I strung soft lanterns along the patio railing, and the reflection of the lights shimmered across the surface of the pool. On Thanksgiving Day, I was surprised by how full the estate felt. Not in a crowded way, but in a lively, warm way I had never experienced here. People complimented the food, laughed at stories, took photos by the fireplace, and wandered through the garden with plates in hand. Kids who'd come with their parents ran through the hallways, giggling and playing tag, turning the quiet corners of the estate into pockets of joy. It didn't feel like hosting. It felt like belonging. Around mid-afternoon, someone posted a photo from the patio, a wide shot of the long table filled with smiling people, food steaming in the center, and the estate glowing in the background. I didn't think anything of it until my phone buzzed, and I saw a message from my sister. "What is this?" Another message followed from my mother. "Why didn't you tell us you were hosting?" Then another from my aunt. "How could you invite strangers and not your own family?" I sat there reading the messages, feeling the old familiar irritation rise inside me, not because they cared about me, but because they were upset they weren't part of something that looked better than whatever disaster their Thanksgiving had become. From the texts that followed, it was obvious things at my sister's house weren't going well. The food was late, the space was cramped, and several relatives left early. Someone had shown them the photo circulating online, and suddenly they realized I wasn't sitting at home alone. I wasn't sulking. I wasn't begging them for a seat. I had created something better, without them. I didn't respond, not out of anger, but because I was done. Done explaining my choices. Done justifying my presence. Done letting people treat me like an afterthought. As the evening settled and the last guests hugged me goodbye, several of them thanked me sincerely for giving them a Thanksgiving they didn't expect but deeply appreciated. And as I stood at the doorway watching them leave, I realized something important. This was the first Thanksgiving I truly felt grateful. My family had wanted me to stay home so I wouldn't inconvenience their plans. Instead, I created my own. And for the first time in years, I wasn't surrounded by people who tolerated me, I was surrounded by people who genuinely valued being there. And that was worth more than any seat at their table.